the delay with the technical difficulties. Thanks everyone for your patience. I appreciate it. Should be able to record, and then we'll just upload to our YouTube channel, and then I will reach out to IT to have them come in. I think replace a little computer over there. So
It's already on.
I will pull it up and just.
All right, hey everyone. I'm Aaron Mercar with SCJ Alliance, working on the comprehensive plan update for a number of months now. And what we're going to be talking about today is mainly the land capacity analysis. I'll provide a brief update on some other aspects of the plan as well. But we have our sub-consultants from Leland Consulting Group who are with us today, Andrew and Daria. So yeah, introduce yourself real quick.
Hi, everybody. Andrew Oliver with Leland Consulting Group. As Aaron said, we're working with SCJ on this comp plan update, mostly on housing and economic development. We are based in Portland, but we work a lot across Washington and Oregon, and a lot with the Spokane office of SCJ across East Washington too. So we've been working on this for a little while, and it's a little late in the process to finally be up here, but it's nice to be here with you all. And we had a nice tour of him, Ron, this afternoon. I'll tell you what.
Daria with Leland Consulting Group. Yeah, we're based in Portland, but we've done a lot of work with comprehensive plans update versus Washington, as Andrew mentioned. Yeah, and finally got to the Washington and to present today.
Okay. I think you're going to keep it up.
Yes.
Okay, just point at me when
Just
you want
point
to
at you.
to the next slide.
All right, good work. All right, we can go through those first slides quickly. So next slide. So our agenda today, just real quickly, I'll go over where we are with the comp plan currently, discuss briefly some of our public outreach results that we've seen. I want to get through those pretty quickly so we can get to the land capacity stuff, which is why we're here today. And with the delay, I'll go through those pretty quickly. Then I'll turn it over to Andrew to walk us through the land capacity stuff. Okay, next slide. Okay, so just as an overview, this is part of a larger project where we're looking at not just the comprehensive plan update. We've also been working on some transportation and parks impact fees. That analysis has been complete, and I believe adoption is in the works right now. Alongside the comprehensive plan update is a climate element, and that's a new addition. The comprehensive plan is a state requirement. And then there will also be a downtown plan that will follow once we get a little bit more underway with the comp plan. So our comprehensive plan is due June 30th, 2027. We're looking at updating land use, housing, capital facilities, utilities, and transportation elements. Those are the required elements, along with a new climate element. And then we will also be updating parks and recreation and economic development element. So just an overview that this plan looks at a little bit of everything. Our work so far. So we've been working on our baseline analysis. We've got a community profile, which just looks at the demographics of the community and the different trends, data points that tell us a little bit about what the city's like today and what the current needs are. We've also done some GA checklists. So just making sure that we know what requirements we need to meet in order to make sure we're compliant with the Growth Management Act. We've looked at housing needs analysis and critical areas to see where there are any gaps with our current housing policies, critical areas ordinance. Our public engagement, which is also a big part of this plan update. We've done a few focus groups. So we did some of those. We did a survey, and I'll have more about this on some next slides. And then we did a public open house. the land capacity analysis, which we will talk about today. And then we've also been working on that climate element as well. So what we're working on next is reviewing the LCA findings with you all, gathering feedback. We're going to finalize some of the recommendations based on the feedback we get today, and then continue to work on that plan development. So this is kind of a key moment where we're bringing some information to you and asking for kind of a gut check on what recommendations we want to move forward. Just a little bit of a summary on the outreach we've done, just so you know. We had did result in a draft vision statement that we have. And I can go to the next slide. So I won't read through all of this, but we do have a quite extensive vision statement that talks about how Ephrata vision is residents feel connected, supported, proud. There's investment in public spaces, housing options for everyone. Safe, connected, us. So the infrastructure costs are shared. Expanded, connected park systems, vibrant downtown, resilient, attractive, and livable community overall, and that we're growing on purpose. So I can provide that full vision statement if you're interested in seeing that. But that was a result of those focus groups. We also had a community survey. I believe we got almost 200, it was like 199 responses on it. So pretty decent response rate. Residents in that survey expressed that they value the family-oriented atmosphere, affordability, and small town character of Ephrata. People housing affordability and availability remain ongoing concerns. Respondents also support economic growth that creates jobs. Transportation investments should focus on maintaining infrastructure and improving pedestrian safety. And you're good. And just overall preserving Ephrata small town. And then we also had an open house back in April. Participants emphasized the importance of strengthening outdoor recreation opportunities, improving walking and bicycling connections, expanding housing options, and supporting continued economic development. Downtown revitalization, trail improvements, sidewalk connectivity, recreation investments, all recurring topics in that open house. All right, and I will now turn it over to Andrew and Daria to go over some of the more specific work of the land has.
Cool, thank you. All right, so we've been working on a lot of everything related to the housing elements. And this list shows sort of the new framework that the state has put forth for cities in their comprehensive plan housing elements. And a lot of this came out of HB 1220 in 2021 and other subsequent legislation. So there's these 7 steps or elements, parts of the housing element, starting with the housing needs assessment, which looks at housing needs in the city. And we'll have a few short slides on that. Then the land capacity analysis, and that looks at targets for housing needs by income band and where they can be accommodated in the city. And then there's an adequate provisions analysis that's sort of necessarily complicated term for just looking at barriers to housing production, regulatory barriers, financial barriers, and market barriers. And then there's an analysis of racially disparate impacts in housing policy. And all those lead into a review of existing goals and policies and an update of housing goals and policies that take into account all this other background work. So there's a lot that goes into the housing element now. It's become a lot more complex since the last comprehensive plan update cycle. And we're going to keep plugging away and tell you where we're at so far. So on the next slide, I just want to talk briefly about the way that the new GMA requirements are structured before we start going into specifics about housing needs and capacity in Ephrata. So there's a new requirement that cities have to show capacity to accommodate a breakdown of their overall housing target by the income levels that housing units accept. So in the past, the state asked cities to look at how much land is zoned for housing and had one population target. And you look at, if you have enough land to accommodate the development that would be needed to meet that target, and the process is over. Now, the target is broken down by income bands, which correspond with expected demand for new housing to accommodate households at a variety of income levels in Ephrata. So that is not only expected new households, but also existing households that are paying more than they can afford for housing. And you have to show zone land capacity for these units. But it's important to know that this analysis is sort of a baseline zoning analysis. So it looks at what could be built under the current and future zoning. So different housing types and where they might, how much space there is, zone space that's redeveloped or vacant. But it doesn't necessarily dictate what is going to be built. So, we have to set the stage here for the housing needs that have been allocated to the city by the state and by the county. But the market, of course, is going to determine what gets built. So whether or not, some multifamily housing or fourplex gets built in a zone where you could build single family, multifamily, or fourplex, any of those things might get built for 20 years. The point of this is to ensure that there's enough capacity for the needs to be met and for the market to be able to have enough options to create those units. And on the right, the way this is set up and that Congress has set this up is that different housing types are correlated with different income levels. And this is based on a series of assumptions, the basic premise being that very low income households in subsidized housing that's funded by things like the low income housing tax credit and other subsidies basically has to be multifamily because that level of subsidized housing that can serve extremely low income households is only available for subsidized apartment development. And apartments have certain infrastructure needs that can be met primarily within cities and UGAs. So the lower income households is through zoning that allows multifamily housing, and then we go up in income levels. Various types of apartments, duplexes, fourplexes, ADUs, other types of middle housing, show land capacity for moderate income households, and then higher income households capacity in zones that allow single family housing. So it's a little bit simplistic, but that's the sort of paradigm that this whole statewide system is based off of. So I just want to introduce the idea here, and then we'll get into the specifics in a few minutes. The next slide, don't really even need to dwell here, but the sort of process by which you conduct this analysis shown on the right. We'll get into it in more detail later. Given the time, let's just move on to the time. But if there's any questions on this GMA stuff before we go on, we can ask or interrupt then.
I didn't go.
Yeah.
So you on your medium income there, you were showing 2, 3, and 4. Your break off is at 4. So is anything private more in this chart considered multifamily?
Well, yeah, it's usually 6 or more, but
Okay, because I mean, in the building code, it's at 5. You've got a sprinkler.
Right,
So
right.
that I'm wondering if that is the same break off.
That's a good point. It's not exactly the same breakup. This is more based on just straight units per acre. So this is based more on zone density and various housing types could be that density. I mean, you could have fourplexes on a small lot that are as dense as an apartment on a larger lot, for example. So the way this is measured, so to speak, is in units per acre, not in units per building. But there's other sort of middle housing legislation that's been passed in recent years that applies to larger cities, and that cutoff is usually 6 or above 6. Okay. We've got 4 brief. You want to do these? Or do you want to go? Okay. We got 4 brief slides on the housing needs assessment. This is basically mostly using census, HUD, and various residential and commercial real estate databases to look at housing needs in the city. And there's a lot of data points that Commerce asks cities to cover in the HNA. So I've just pulled a few out here to talk about. So the population is growing at a slower rate in Grand County, but still expected to have a moderate amount of growth over the next 20 years. The greatest population is younger than regional and state averages, median age of 31. High share of households with children. We heard about the family-friendly vision in the vision statement, so it seems to reality to agree. The city's become quite a bit more diverse in the past decade, as you see on the left, with especially growing Hispanic and Latino community, and also a lot of more residents identifying as two or more races, which is something we see nationwide since the 2020 census. So 65% of households are owner occupied, and one measure of housing affordability that's used a lot in subsidized housing calculations and also in federal and state data is cost burden. Cost burden means you're spending more than 30% of your household income on housing costs. And severe cost burden means you're spending more than 50% of your household income on housing costs. So those are in the pink and red here on the right. So about a quarter of all households are cost burdened, spending more than 30% of their income on housing, and about half of those are spending more than half their income. There's not a huge disparity between renters and owners. Renters are facing a little bit more challenge paying for housing, but it's not a huge disparity as we see in a lot of other places. So let's see. Multifamily housing accounts for 11% of housing in the city currently. Housing is pretty old. About half the units, housing units in Ephrata were built before 1970, so it's older than the county and the state average. And we were talking with Ron about population trends over the past 50 years, which probably partially account for that. And this chart shows change in rent, home price, and income. So income is the dotted line, kind of going up and down a little bit. Hasn't changed a whole lot since 2014. But housing prices, especially the blue line, which shows house ownership housing prices, have gone up quite a bit more. So there's been essentially more challenges in affording housing, especially purchasing housing in the city, especially since 2020, which we see all over Eastern Washington and Central Washington. And I think also fits with what Aaron was talking about for surveys. So, yep. Finally, there's a couple gaps that we analyze generally. One is how many units are available at different price points versus how many households are earning those income levels. So we see here in the solid bars is how many households are earning, whatever the income. So 20, 40, 60, $80, $100,000. And then in the dotted lines, how many, rental units, whether they could be multifamily or single family rental units, are affordable to households at that income level. So there's a lot of, it's showing overall that rental units in Ephrata are kind of moderately priced. Certainly some households that are renting are making more money than they need to afford the units, but there's also a bit of a gap at the lower end, especially in very low income households, with fewer subsidized units than are needed. But it's not extreme compared to a lot of cities you've been looking at in this conference. There's also, and this is also normal, smaller households than housing units. It's not really anything that needs to be perfectly addressed. I think it's worth pointing out only in the sense of when there's 1 or 2 person households that don't have the option for a smaller unit, that they might be paying more than they can afford because they have to rent a larger or buy a larger house or apartment because that's what's available. So it's important to have providing different housing sizes, especially for people who might be able to afford to have extra rooms. Although, of course, there's no obviously, but it's good to look at. So those are some highlights. The whole HNA, I think, was a simple one, right? Materials, yes, and there's a lot more data in there if you have a look. So we move on to LCA unless there's any questions or comments. Cool. All right. So briefly, okay, we're doing good on time. Our boss is always telling me to talk more slowly. So if anyone wants me to talk, tell me to talk more slowly. Okay. So the state creates these housing targets for every county at the countywide level. The OFM provides population projections, and then using a bunch of data from the census and from HUD, looks at what the estimated needs are at various income bands. And these are measured as a percentage of the area median income, AMI. So all these percents that you're going to now see for the rest of the presentation are percents of the area median income in various categories, 0 to 30, 30 to 50, 50 to 80, et cetera. And as we'll see later, and as I mentioned before, those line up with different house type capacities. So we had a bunch of meetings with Frank County. They were pretty productive meetings, facilitated by the county and their consultants, to allocate this countywide need to all the cities, UGAs, and unincorporated areas. And we don't have to go through this in detail, but though I wanted to show the chart because one thing, as it says in the third bullet there, that's important about this process and a little tricky is that all the housing that serves lower income bands, that's under 80% AMI, must by state law be allocated inside UGAs and cities. So this has been a little bit of a frustration in this process across the state, from my perspective anyway, because people of all income levels live in rural and urban areas throughout the state, obviously. But because the lower income bands are associated with multifamily housing, which requires a certain level of infrastructure, which isn't usually present outside cities and UGAs, the GMA requires that all the lower income targets are assigned to cities and UGAs. So in counties with a lot of rural area, it means that the cities and UGAs get more lower income targets. It's not as extreme here as in like say Stevens County, where we're also working, but it is something that sort of is a part of the way this has been set up that is not able to be changed because it's very explicit in the GMA. So that means that there is a little bit more capacity needed to be shown for multifamily housing in places like great occupancy, but like I said, it's not like completely insurmountable. We've seen more rural counties have more problems with this, but it is something that I just wanted to point. Okay, so this shows various housing allocation, again going from lower income bands to higher income bands, and so you can see there's a pretty significant number of units in the 0 to 80%, and also quite a bit of expected need in the higher income. And there's also this emergency housing target for 15. That's actually in beds, like shelter beds. That is a sort of later addition to the process that we basically just it's associated with some required code updates to allow those housing types in every city. But all in all, the total number of units is 1,726 units between 2020 and 2047. Baseline is set at 2020 because all of the comp plans across the state have a 2020 baseline for the past 3 years of not planning. And so anything that's been built since 2020, as we'll see in a minute, also counts towards these targets or things that are in the pipeline. So questions on this before we move on? Okay. Daria's going to talk about methodology and results.
Yeah, I think we're ready to a little bit to spend methodology. So the base methodologies provided by the Department of Commerce, but the Grant County also went through their own process and distributed the methodology for all their jurisdictions along with the housing needs allocations for each city. So here we see the process in steps. So first off, we need to identify what with zoning, right? Each parcel has its own zoning, and based on the zoning regulations and what's already built on it, we can classify parcels. But first, we need to exclude parcels that are already been developed or that are not developable or excluded by the assessor code or their current use, like public facilities, stuff like that. So then after exclusion of these parcels, we have the parts that could be either vacant, partially developable, redevelopable, or underdeveloped or underutilized. I won't go through like all of the deals here, but yeah, each of these parcels left will is split onto this three. Basically in the Grant County methodology, either on the vacant or redevelopable parcel. The vacant are usually those that are assigned the vacant use by the assessor code. And partially developable or underutilized are either parcels that are in the low density zone and can be subdivided into more parcels. So they can go to the extra subdivision process if they 3 times more than the minimum required lot for this particular zone. And for underdeveloped or underutilized parcels in the higher density zones, the medium density residential, as it is in Ephrata, there's a parcel that might have a building on it, but the improvement value of it, the building value is lower than the land value. So meaning that it could be redeveloped with a higher value. And or sometimes it's also if there's a single family house on the higher density residential zone, so something at the higher residential zone could be developed on the parcel, meaning that the land capacity is higher than it's what's actually built. But recently built parcels are recently developed parcels are excluded from the analysis as well, and the units in the pipeline or that have been developed since 2020 as a baseline are included in the current pipeline that will count towards the housing needs established by the county. So this is the main piece where I wanted to stop a little bit longer, but maybe we'll just go through all the maps and see the rest of it the real example for Ephrata. Next slide. So those are the parcels that I've just talked about, the excluded parcels by tax that are tax exempt based on their use and ownership. The restricted parcels, obviously, small easement, right of way areas. Mobile home parks also were excluded where they're established and the overlay exists. And again, the parcels that are recently completed and already developed. The green part, the parcels, orange and outlined in the bright green are the parcels in the pipeline. Sometimes there's not yet been construction, but if we know that there is proposed subdivision plan for that, we already included it in the pipeline because it's more realistic than pipeline for the 20-year horizon. Next slide. The critical areas is important consideration in this analysis, and in Ephrata, especially because of the quite big flood hazard area on the downtown part of Ephrata. So this parcels are also usually excluded from the analysis, and the streams and wetlands, steep slopes, more than 15%. These and other hazard areas like flood areas that are prone to this. And initially we excluded all hazard areas, but we know that this downtown area there is under the FEMA flood hazard zone. It's being developed or already like developed in some areas, so we know that something can be built there, so there is capacity, so we apply the lower threshold, so not just excluding these parcels that can be redeveloped, but applying that if there's like 50%, it's a little bit arbitrary, but yeah, like 50% of that would be redeveloped. Next slide, and we will see it on the map as well. Yeah, right here, like since I was talking about this topic, I just point out that this is the area that is outlined in bright pink. So only the area is zoned as CBD zone, which could be, yeah, allow the higher density development. So yeah, the other parcels that were not excluded were classified between those two categories. The vacant parcels, partially used that are redevelopable, and underutilized that are redevelopable. And yeah, they're pointed on the map as well. Are there any questions here on the classification? Okay, go to the next slide. Yeah, so this parcel acreage with the gross acreage that we do have, but obviously not all of this developed in the realities. So there's different considerations. So there's a utility thing, the infrastructure that will be needed, and market itself also will highlight how much will be developed. So in the analysis, we're applying the reduction factors to this gross acreages. First, this right of way and infrastructure reduction factor, which is between 10 and 20%. The range is also based on the grant count methodology recommendations. We like discussions with the city as well. Vacant lands are assigned higher reduction factors since they're usually less utilities available. And the available parcels are assigned lower reduction factor for infrastructure. For the market factor, it's flipped. Usually, yeah, vacant lots are more desirable to be redeveloped. They're cheaper. And 10% was applied for the vacant and 25 for redeveloped parcels. So here in the on the table, we can see already net vacant and redevelopable acreage for each zone where these reduction factors were applied. We also, you can see the unincorporated urban growth areas in the analysis as well. Yeah, even though like with the GMA, some of the units can be allocated there, but the county asked us not to assign any housing allocation needs within in the unincorporated urban growth areas. So, and look first at the city, but we still were asked to analyze the capacity in these areas as well.
Real quickly, can you go back real quick?
Yeah.
Just to clarify what I'm looking at there, you're telling me that there is, if I was a developer coming into town saying I want to build some high density housing apartment complex, there is no available space anywhere in Ephrata for mixed density residential?
Oh, that's in vacant. So that's
Vacant,
that
right.
for redevelop. Well, sometimes, yeah, well, maybe if we some of this, some of the parcels might actually look like more vacant than redevelopable. So redevelopable in reality doesn't mean that there's like it's already built up and it could be redeveloped at the higher density. Sometimes there might be, as I said, like parcel, for example, there's a huge lot, it's under the mixed density residential area, but there is a single family house. So that there is a lot of vacant space, but for the methodology, it wasn't assigned vacant because by the assessor use, it actually has a residential use on it, for example. But the next step in the process was to see like what are the other this left parcels might still be developed. So redevelopable again doesn't mean that it's already how percent. How about 50% is developed on it. It's parcel by parcel. We can look at the map more in details and see some of this. And on examples, we have a bigger map to show. Yeah.
So is that 973.3 figure, is that potential buildable ground in Ephrata? Is that what that's telling me?
Yes. But it is including all of the zones, so we are,
Right.
right, so then
But
they're also
but that's-
light industrial, but yeah, here we shown, like, we talked already a lot about housing, but actually, by the GMA requires me to analyze the commercial land as well for, employment, and we'll have a slide on it too. Also, we didn't have targets for the employment lands, the job and associated employment capacity, land capacity for that. But the 973 is like all areas, not just one house.
Correct, correct. I just shocked that we have that much ground into.
Well, a lot of it is
We-
the border.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
All the
yeah, I
vacant
know.
lots, exactly, yeah, and yeah, from the,
And also, you know, just mentioned,
Yes.
the low density residential 300 acres there of vacant.
Yeah.
It's also, you know, uh, it's not an entirely realistic amount of vacant land for low density residential because
Yeah.
some of it is on the hill. Some of it is, you know, even though it couldn't really be developed, but some of it's showing up here because maybe on some of those parcels, it's not all 50% slope or more.
can we go back to one slide? Yeah, with this, so a lot of this vacant land on the northeast is industrial zone. Yeah, the parcel that you were just talking about is on this hillside on the other side, yeah, which is shown as vacant, but you can see that like it's fully vacant, but the acreage of the critical areas was excluded. But again, we like toured it today and we're like, it's still like might be the higher percent of the area or the entire parcel because it's still hard to get there to build roads. This stuff. So there's definitely a lot of ground truth and that's, yeah, why we're here and we can see the city.
I think the thing is too, that this is it's the technical process, but it's
Yeah.
not perfect. It's, you know, the intent is to estimate the land capacity in order to justify any changes we're proposing and to kind of help us identify what we might need to change. But it's, you know, we also didn't go parcel by parcel and identify everything we're trying to do, you know.
We did a little bit of
We
this.
did a
yeah,
little
with
bit.
the help of
Yeah.
this, yeah, planning stuff, but yeah, we know a lot of parcels.
Yeah,
We
so-
can go look at every. Yeah, but go to slide further. So yeah, once we have this net developable acreage, the vacant over developable, we look like, yeah, how much housing can be developed there, how many units in each zone. So each zone has their own limits of the maximum density. So here, and following the methodology, we're looking at the maximum density that's allowed by the current zone. And also how many units, what density been developed in recent years. Here we look at 10 years back. But yeah, here there was data for 6 years. It was really good. In the LTR zone, recent development is developed at the density of 6 dwelling units per acres. The maximum is 8. The methodology doesn't prevent to use the maximum density, but we went here for the medium density between the achieved density, residential density in the zone and maximum density. NDR is a little bit more compact zone, so there are a lot of different types of housing can be developed. Single family duplexes, cottages and tiny homes can be all middle housing and multi-family. This zone was actually in the analysis. It wasn't just not only one density was applied on the whole developable acreage, was split in by 20 and 80%, saying that only 20% will be developed at a higher density for multifamily because of what's being built in the market currently. So we can just say that, okay, well, everybody now going to build a multifamily and the 18 dwelling units per acre in this zone. Developable parcels. So we split it, and the other 90% were assumed to be developed at the medium density before family and communal housing typologies to 10 dwelling units per acre. CBD and commercial areas where housing can be developed, where actually the C1 is only under their transitional overlay, the house can develop, but there's no maximum density, but for this areas where it can be developed, we assign the maximum density of multifamily, similar at the NDR zone as well. So on the next slide, we have, all of these densities were applied to the associated zones and the share of each zones. LDR and MDR zones are fully residential, 100% of it both residential. The commercial zone only 1% went to residential, which approximately the amount of that is under the transition and overlay, and CBD zone assumed 20% of redevelopers would be housing. So the housing units capacity then was split by the associated housing, split by the income bands, which were like, remember what was the beginning of the presentation, like this income bands. So the low income bands are aggregated to over that 80, and basically, it's a higher density multi-family development. Housing was is assigned the that between 80 and 120 of AMI, and anything that higher than 120% AMI, which is usually just all single family, so all LDR zone went to this capacity. And here we also have the column for the pipeline units that are already either has been built since 2020 or are in the books to be built. All of this is then, compared against the remaining housing needs, and the total capacity is defined in the capacity column. But we can see that in the lower income band, there is a deficit of housing units. So where Orlando was pointing out at the beginning that there's enough total housing units capacity, but not enough units for the lower income bands. So there's a deficit, even though there's a little over than 4,000 units in total capacity for Ephrata within the city limits, not including the UGA areas. Very good. Any questions here? This part might be.
This table's not.
Yeah. Okay, we can go next. And answer any other questions. So since there is a deficit in the lower income band, we need to show that how the city will address this gap, and we went through some of the collaborative process and thinking about that with Ron as well. Basically, the proposed changes to address the deficit in the low income band is several zones, areas that are zoned as low density residential are proposed to be zoned to NDR, and they're outlined in blue, bright blue on the map. We see this big vacant parcel that is, it's an LDR zone, but it's vacant. The previous comprehensive plan also went through the future land use map, where also we relied to this previous process to assign change the zones in the propose zone changes for increase capacity.
Also, there's a bit in here, some of these areas where there's vacant land that could be a little denser, or at least potentially so, and this parcel. But the big one is this one, where there's been the most. We worked
the most.
on to, I don't know if you want to add anything about that parcel.
It is developed, it's gonna be one of those areas where, if a developer were to come in, it's gonna be a large developer, and it's gonna probably be some, for them to make money on it, it's going to be pretty dense development, so that's why it's most likely best as a higher density, like similar to what is already out in that area, and that all the way in the south, and that dark blue
And
area.
it's privately owned now, right? That's not residual city. Yeah.
And it's also served, right? Or could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are already some roads right towards it, so
That-
it's
that
not
has-
like out of nowhere that
It has sewer and water
Yeah.
already going down that line in between the upper rectangle and the lower rectangle on the east. So we have water, we have sewer present, we have the reclaimed water going through it. So
Yeah, I'm much more open to rezoning areas like that aren't already developed as opposed to halfway through someone's development, rezoning it and saying, yeah, by the way, we're going to have an apartment complex in the middle of your neighborhood. That is going to go over
Yeah.
very well.
one other thing is, with all the other requirements, that we're gonna have the low density designations are gonna be a higher density.
Right.
yeah, but not like all the high density means like it will go towards the line band capacity. It still actually matters like what type of housing is been developed and assume like that, for example, well, we know that like ADU could be counted towards the additional capacity for lower income bands, but they cannot serve lower than 50%. So, but we can add them to the aggregated capacity for low income bands. Again, even though if we were able to, which we can break down to all of this income bands of the lower aggregated lower income, there might be some change, but in general, that's where we should go. In the next slide, if we look at the next slide, so if this zoning changes were applied, so that's how much capacity it might give to the city. Especially important to look at this lower income bands again, the aggregated column and the row. First, it will help to fill in the gap, but also to exceed and add some surplus in the low income bands. All the other, like for example, single family, not just one. Oh, sorry. High income bands numbers were not changed here because we're looking more towards the lower income band. Any questions here?
I have a question. I don't know who even to direct it to. That previous map, if you pull that back up again, obviously we don't own the port property.
Mhm.
I've always been, as far as bigger master plan goes, I've never been clear on how much of an invisible wall we've hit with the port and what to do with that buttressing area. If there came opportunities for land swaps or we saw opportunities, I don't know that they have plans for what to do with what's closest to the city and seem to like having a buffer. But are you under the impression that we really just need to leave that vacant? They're going to be just a empty spot and then there's industrial between the residential, or is there any other things we can do with that buttressing land?
I think because as far as you're not gonna. In the past, there's always been that conversation that says, the industrial can be rezoned to residential, but it's so far out, it doesn't lend itself to residential. And if there's no infrastructure, right now, there's more likely to be some type of industrial or, a solar project is actually looking at some of that stuff on the north. Northeast. I don't know if that's answering your question, but
The 600
Well-
buffer, there's that 600 buffer that's.
yeah, that is one other thing. Along the edge, there is that mixed mixed use transition. So that would allow some residential, but only in that buffer area that's right along the edge between the residential and the port.
But what we're addressing today is just showing that we have the potential, not.
Yeah.
not necessarily-
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's all we have to really address.
Yeah.
Yeah,
at the state.
current zone, yeah, the current zoning, yeah, there's. not enough
So you
capacity
could show
for
now,
that.
even without incorporating stuff up there, but based off that last slide. right?
Yeah, based
Yeah,
on the,
just these, just with
Yeah.
this sort of
Yeah.
the
It's the-
targeted rezones to MDR, you could show, and especially with that large parcel, but also some of the other ones up there near the airport. You can show enough capacity. And again, we're not even assuming that all of it is going towards multi-family capacity. There's a mix. And so it gives you a bit of a buffer. I think the buffer is important to think about because, obviously, people are going to build a variety of things. Even if one or multiple developers came in down there, like we saw up north, maybe they would build some fourplexes and some single-family homes.
These are questions more probably for the port than for you guys. I was just curious if someone came along and they were looking to build an apartment complex and they said, well, we can build one right on the other side of the group home out by the Mormon church, but it's not zoned right or whatever. If the port is even interested or if they have pretty hard lines of what they're willing to do and where they can do it. But again, questions for people I'm not sure in the room.
Don't know that the board knows. I think that's part of it they're working on right now. Is to identify the actual use of what they do have.
Sure.
Hopefully I have that answer in a year. Like a more solid written plan.
Well, the benefit of having the port understand what our plans are and having our plans be understanding what the port's plans are. For that mixed use buffer, what the potential is for that. I think for too long, we've had a plan and ideas and they've had a plan or ideas. None of them have ever coincided.
Yeah, the last slide on LCA is just a very brief look at employment. There we are. So, we have all these targets for housing, this whole involved process. For employment, it's not like that. The GMA does say that you have to show or ensure, I guess, that you have sufficient land for your projected amount of employment. And in, at least in sort of Puget Sound counties, the counties were providing employment targets to cities. But here in Grand County, also Stevens County, the county has not provided any employment targets to cities. So we did some simple employment forecasting just to sort of see what it looks like. You see existing jobs in the blue line on the left, and then sort of a linear trend in yellow, a compound growth rate in blue, which is just a percentage increase every year. And then in green, this fine one looks at how many jobs there are now compared to housing units, and it projects that out based on housing and forecasts. Not necessarily the best way to do a job forecast, but I wanted to just provide a sort of range of potential employment forecasts. Obviously, the high one, as you can see from the past, seems pretty unlikely, but who knows? There's a lot of big industrial land. Maybe someone will come up with something big. Regardless, the red line at the top shows that, given all that vacant industrial land, there's a large amount of employment land capacity in Ephrata. So there's not really an issue here with needing to change any zoning or do anything for industrial land. In fact, it was giving the opposite case to your point to some degree. But at least I think this is sufficient to show for any sort of state compliance. But I think that there's enough land for a number of different potential future employment scenarios. Okay. Yeah, we could breeze through these quickly, but I think the most important thing before we move on is that there's any other thing to talk about is as far as these potential rezones, because we need to incorporate those MDR changes into the revised future land use map. That'll be part of the comprehensive plan. And you have to adopt enough zoning changes to meet these targets concurrently with the plan, which is next June. So I don't know if there's anybody else or anything else we want to cover on the LCA.
so proposing rezoning some of those LDR to MDR zone. That seems, especially it seems like there was no opposition to that large vacant parcel on the south side. We have some parcels kind of within the city too, which we could always take more of a look at, but in general, is that sitting well as a way to address that gap that we're showing.
Sure. Did you follow kind of what I was trying to say? I
Yeah,
feel like the port is off your radar because it's not in our real jurisdiction and you have to coordinate with them. If you look on that invisible wall there, we've been just building around them with clearly residential intent. It's easily buildable land and it's far closer to our infrastructure than that south district would be. You could easily tap into a lot of stuff and there's a main thoroughfare of road there.
Right, yeah.
Again, you don't want to crowd in on their great expectations of industrial growth out that side, but you could see quite a few acres there that are easily incorporated into residential if they were willing to rezone and sell it off to a developer. Can't force that on.
It's worth a mention. We can find a way to integrate that in here. I mean, I don't think we should be able to putting a policy in, in the housing element that says, just to direct some potential coordination in the future, or just make sure that as the port develops their plan, which probably will happen, maybe not even before this comp plan is done, but that, the city should keep engaging with the port to understand their potential land needs and see if there might be any, especially given that we see there are some circles from this time. So I think it's worth a mention.
Yeah,
Somewhere,
yeah, that could be
at least on the policy.
another way to provide for more capacity.
Yeah, or just different
Yes.
options for the future.
What we're really saying is that there's a deficit in the projected numbers of housing that's needed.
Yeah.
And the way to do that is to change our densities to our land uses to mixed density residential.
Yeah, and some of those
Yeah.
targeted
And
areas.
even look at setback requirements and smaller lot sizes and everything else.
Yeah, that-
Family as well, but
Right.
those are the only caveats. Unless we grow more land.
Yeah, but I mean, there's not, it's not a, it's not, the freight's not totally built. Right? There's these options, there's places in the city, you don't really need to look at the UGA or any kind of expansion in order to meet the target. And it's a sort of targeted upzoning of places that it makes sense to do it, and rather than trying to do a blanket thing. Okay, I'm gonna do this in like 2 minutes each, just so you know what's going on, and if we have like 5 more, do you have 5 more minutes? I don't know how early you want to end.
Yeah, 5 more.
Okay. So one side on recently distant impacts, this is an analysis that the state asks cities to look at if there's data that shows that there's a disproportionate housing burden across different racial and ethnic groups. And especially on a policy level. So this is sort of the data level. We saw it's slightly less diverse in the county. There's been a lot of growth in Hispanic population. White Hispanic households are facing similar levels of affordability. There's, some Hispanic Latino households, a higher share of renters, a little bit lower incomes in the Hispanic population here compared to white households. So it's not hugely disparate impacts. And what this leads to is a policy review, looking at existing policies in the housing element and whether or not they might be sort of furthering any of these type of impacts. We did that review and found, a few things to change here and there, but most of them, there's nothing like explicit, obviously, like explicitly racist policy. It's more about ensuring that there's a variety of options available to a variety of household types and sizes. So that is drafted in your packet if you want to have a look. So there will be some small changes to, language here and there in both policies. The next is adequate provisions. This is a look at barriers to housing production. It's a checklist that looks like this. And these are sort of based on various things that could make it unduly difficult to build needed types of housing. So on the next slide, we have just a few recommendations that came out of this analysis so far. There are some housing types that are allowed for conditional use that we recommend allowing by right, townhomes, flexes. We are suggesting a very slight increase in MDR to 25 units per acre to be better in line with types of apartments that can be more feasible to pencil from a developer's perspective. It's also a density that Congress does not require, but recommends for housing that can serve lower income bands. But we looked a little bit at height, parking requirements. Parking requirements are coming down from the state anyway, so this is not really anything that you want to have to do anyway, but you can look at it now. For duplexes, there's a higher parking requirement for family per unit. We talked a little bit about setbacks. We talked about ground floor commercial. This is, and this wasn't even, I don't think, everywhere in CBD and C1, but, you know, there's good reasons to want to see ground floor commercial in multifamily development. It's also can be tricky from the developer's perspective if say not on a busy street or somewhere where it makes sense for ground floor commercial and they could you know the project could pencil better without it, and so it's more of a recommendation to think about carefully about ground floor commercial and where to put it. And then finally, some updates to comply with state requirements for ADUs and emergency housing. We talked about that already. ADUs coming in 2 per lot, and STEP requires that you allow urban supportive housing in all zones where housing is allowed, and that you allow emergency shelters in all zones where hotels are allowed. So those are pretty straightforward changes in these things.
It use those exterior dwelling unit, like a extra little
Exactly.
mother's cottage thing.
The external, and they can also be internal, so like a basement, that's a separate unit with its own entrance. And they can be attached or detached configuration. Could be garage conversion as well. So those are just a few sort of small regulatory things we don't need to worry about that. We've been talking about with staff and we'll continue to work on, and you'll see those be discussed at a later date.
That's a lot of information.
Oh, I got it.
We got
4.5 minutes.
We did it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Ron or myself. These guys as well. So, thank you all for your time. And if, any final comments or questions for us?
I have I guess a quick question, kind of late to the discussion, but when we had the one map up, you've got that port property, you've got that island out in the middle that should be developed. All that land around that is vacant. Refresh my memory. Is that inside city limits or is that? It is, isn't it? It's just vacant ground, but it's not port property.
I think it is. If I'm thinking of the right.
Is it port?
It is port property. And I think they've kept everything pretty much industrial by choice, just to keep it simple as to what their goal and objective.
Yeah. On the,
Or own it.
yeah,
On the north.
I'm looking at the red vacant. You've got the purple in the middle on the right north
Len.
up there.
That's Len Rock.
That is all privately owned.
Yeah.
Okay.
The port starts where the red
Yeah.
ends, so because we excluded the
It's-
port lane.
Yeah.
So when we're looking for potential growth, we've got that bottom right hand, straight in the middle, which is off Dodson Road. That's probably ripe for development, but we also have this big chunk out there on the northeast side that potentially would be a good development.
Yeah, but it's all industrial. So.
Yeah.
So we would have to look at rezoning, which makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, could be farther down.
There's residentially a community that's just toward this.
Yeah, up there.
Out there, yeah.
Just for clarity, which one I was talking about. In my opinion, this triangle ought to be rezoned. Some capacity. The port's never gonna use it. They don't want it, but I don't think they're ready to just
Sell it.
Sell it for sure.
It's also not in line with the runway, which is good.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably other options.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, you know, in a way, Ephrata is lucky because just the fact these options are coming up compared to a lot of cities, like there's quite a bit of land, obviously, the land in the city that's,
Yeah.
so you don't have to deal with UDA and expansion and all that. So I think proposed in the far longer term horizon, there's definitely more options beyond this, beyond the next two years as well. Cool.
So, you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, there is. Things for you to snack on. Long evening, and you have another meeting if you want to jump in there to on Jason's desk, if you want to help yourself there. Peter Pitt and chips.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks for your time, everybody.
Thank you. No birthday cake?
No birthday cake.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday. I brought my truck.
I can't. I have a convertible in this heat. Are you kidding me?
But you can see, you can come out and see in the truck.
Well, I thought the
Oh, the- yeah.
garage right now.
Okay, thank
Made that for you.